depression. My parents did. And you may remember this from hearing it from your parents. They lost a lot. They lost almost everything. And their attitude was, it's the one thing that someone can't take away from you is an education. Everything else you can lose. But if you invest in an education, that's the best thing you can do. So we want you to be thinking about saving for your education. So I started peddling papers when I was 8 and saving money and working, and I realized I wasn't going to make it by just saving, so I better start getting better grades, and I better start really thinking about getting a scholarship. And I just focused on education. It was so important. It was like the first 5 things in my life were, getting an education. I grew up in a Christian family in Ohio, a small congregational church. My mother was the church secretary, and my father was the sexton of the church. And I was really good at pretending like I was paying attention. I learned how to look like I was listening. Back then, you go to church out of respect for your parents. You do things out of respect. You didn't argue. It was just the thing to do in the 50s and the early 60s. And I did that. I went to church and Sunday school until I left home. But it seemed to me that the pastor was always talking about third person. It's always they, them. There's always someone else's problems. And I really couldn't, it didn't register to me. And yet the education I was gaining did register to me. Because I was being taught theory, and I was equated, and I could explain things, and I could create things. And being kind of the inventor type, I was very satisfied to be able to be in charge. And I knew enough about the universe and the creation of the universe and the physics that's behind that, and I know that they can get almost back to the microseconds of creation with equations and take you forward, but they can't quite get those first few microseconds down. There's no theory now that tells how that happened. So that's where an engineer like me would say, okay, that's God. God created that universe. And that was his big deal. But I've got all this knowledge. I'm on my own now. So I didn't come to God for solution, for prayer, for support. I came up with my own religion, my own kind of righteousness, partly moral background from being raised with my parents and my own belief and my own reading and philosophy and all that. And I was totally on my own. My goal was to make a lot of money. I'm an introvert. This would not be how I would choose to have a morning to speak to people. I'd rather be in the back room with a book someplace. And I'm not good at asking people for things. So I thought, well, the only way I'm going to really do something significant is I better make a lot of money first. So I'm going to work really hard as I can, and learn as much as I can, and wind up moving to California. And this is where everybody becomes a billionaire, right? So it'll be my chance to. And once it's working, I meet my wife in 1972 back in New York, and she was pretty much the same background I was. Brought up a strong Catholic and went to school to study religion, but had pretty much left the Lord out of her life too. When we have 3 children, everything's going along my way. I'm focusing on trying to make money, and she's focusing on raising 3 children. Our oldest daughter's 13. She gets an eating disorder. She gets a case of bulimia. And it's a pretty bad case of bulimia. So I started looking into the books, and I started talking to experts, and I'm trying to solve this problem with bulimia for a 13-year-old. And I pretty much heard from the experts I chose to listen to that you just have to live through it. And so we did our best to keep her alive, essentially. And for 3 years we succeeded, but when she got to be 16, her life had gotten to the point where she admitted to herself that she needed help. She didn't know what that meant, but she just needed help. She just reached out, which was a breakthrough, really. So I do my research, and I find the best eating disorder clinic in the country is in Remuda Ranch. It's in Arizona. And it's a Christian-based program, and that really made no difference to me because I picked it because it was the best. I remember one of the saddest days of my life is when my wife and I drove went along with it, so to speak, and she earned the right to have a visitor, have us come back. But so we came back 3 weeks later. This would be in July in Arizona, outside. It's Wickenburg. Really hot. We get there on a Sunday morning, and we had the choice as to we could stay in the car with the air conditioner on because we got there early, or we could go to the chapel. And they had a trailer out in the middle of this desert with an air conditioner. We could hear it. And we say, well, we'll go to the chapel, see what that's like. And there are 19 girls with eating disorders, and the man who's doing the chapel is the man who started the clinic, and he came to Christ through the struggle he had trying to get his daughter through an eating disorder. And we sit in the back, and the basis of the chapel was to define what love is. In asking 19 girls with eating disorders who have these incredible identity distortions in their own view of themselves to come up with a definition for what does love mean. And so he goes to the first girl, then he goes to the second, then he goes to the third. And I can see the plan. He's going to go through all 19 girls, and then he's going to talk to the adults who are in the back, and he's going to expect some wisdom from the adults, right? And I can see I'm going to be the first adult when he gets done with the last girl. So I'm sweating bullets. I'm going to come up with I must have heard this in songs, or what does love mean? I'm going to have to come up with something really, really urgent here. This is critical. And then he opens the Bible and he reads what you already heard once, but I need to read it again. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always preserves. Well, anyway, while he was talking, I was so relieved because the Bible saved me. The Bible actually, I was literally saved by the Bible that day because he interceded, having me speak to have Paul speak. And I wasn't even listening to the words. I was just so relaxed. And then he relieved, and then he reads it again, and then he read it the second time. I'm thinking, that's profound. That definition of love is really profound. And I had heard it before in weddings, you see it sometimes in cars to people, and it never really registered to me how profound those words are. So that was kind of like the first light bulb went on. Before that, my most important probably thinking about religion and Scripture was coming not from even the Bible, but from Leonard Cohen. In the 70s, he was very popular in his words. And there's one song he wrote called Anthem, and of the words of that song are a little bit like this. It says, ring the bells that can still ring. Forget your perfect offering. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So 3 weeks later, our daughter earns another privilege, and we get to visit her, and we get to take her out, but we have to go to church. So we go to downtown Phoenix, and it's always been growing very quickly, that city. And there's this church that's in the gymnasium of his high school, because they hadn't had the time yet to build a sanctuary. And the pastor is just pouring his heart out about his problems. The problems he's having with his children, the problems he's having with his wife, with his neighbors, with the community. And I'm thinking, this is so different than the way it was 40 years ago when I was going to church, 30 years ago. It was all about somebody else, and here's this pastor to talk all about his problems. And remarkable. So at the end of the service, our daughter Erica grabs my hand and my wife's and Lori, and she drags us down to the front. So we're standing right there, and the pastor's up here, and everyone's leaving, and Erica shouts out, these are my parents, and they have to start going to church. And she didn't say, we have to start going to church. She said, they have to start going to church. So I'm kind of on the spot churches like that in Orange County where we live. And he said, well, I think Mariners Church is a lot like this non-denominational Christian church. So that next week we were in Mariners, and we've been going to Mariners ever since. So the light is starting to come in through the cracks, right? After 3 years of going Sunday and then immediately getting into the car and driving home and becoming the other guy, and then living that way till the next Sunday, and then I go to church and I hear about all this wonderful stuff that I'm supposed to be doing and believing, and then I go back to my normal life. I realized that I've got to do more. So many people are helping our daughter get over this eating disorder. She's being moved from one clinic to another around the country, making monkeys of some of the best therapists we have. But they're trying to help her, and I've got to pay back. I got to do something. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I can be a volunteer. I could. The Mariners has a learning center down in Santa Ana. I can tutor. I've got a PhD in engineering. I should be able to help these kids with their math and their science. Well, these kids they're all from Central America, and Spanish, English is their second language, and they're having trouble remembering their multiplication tables. And I couldn't get to the point where I could help them, try though I may. So after a couple years of that and not getting anywhere, maybe I can mentor people. That seems to be something that would be cool. And so I volunteered for the program, and the kids they choose for me to mentor, they're on parole and in and out of jail and sleeping in the backseat of cars, and they're on the run. And they had no interest in talking to some guy, some engineer, about how to get their life in order. So I'm struggling a little bit, and the light cracks still keep on letting more and more light in. And then it's almost like I can confess what happened in a period of about 18 months into a conversation. Granted, this is not the way it happened in real life. It was almost like the phone rang and I picked it up and asked who it was, and it's like, this is the Lord speaking. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm trying my own little way to help out, I'm trying to mentor, I'm trying to tutor. He says, listen, when have you ever been interested in education? Never. What about this mentoring thing? You remember the psychology class you just barely got through? You hate psychology, don't you? Yeah. So why are you trying to do things that you can't do? Why don't you do something with the tools I gave you? And then, literally a hang-up because he didn't follow through with what he wanted me to do. But I'm thinking, I'm an engineer, I'm creative, I'm an inventor. I work in the back room of some of the big companies, and I make medical products for us, for our society, blood separating equipment, diagnostic equipment. And I'm really busy doing that, and that's what I know how to do, and that's what I don't know if I need this distraction right now, or I'm trying to become a billionaire. And then so the phone rings again. It says, remember that time you were in Morocco? Yeah, Lord, I do. Remember that lady that you saw dragging herself across the road? Yeah, I'll never forget one. And she was literally using her fingernails to drag herself across this road, and her clothes are shredded and they're dirty and she's bleeding. And remember how you felt? Yeah, I felt pretty bad. Remember when you looked around, nobody was doing anything about it? I do remember that. I couldn't understand why no one was trying to help this lady. Yeah, but then you found out, remember? You found out that that's the way life is in a developing country. You live with it. Yeah, that was pretty bad, Lord. I said, well, why don't you start there? So I started to think about, well, what does that person need? And I look into, all kinds of crazy things, but the obvious one was a wheelchair. So I look into, well, who else needs a wheelchair in the world? And there's somewhere near 100 million people, it turns out, needing a wheelchair in the world. Can't afford them. These are people living in developing countries. I knew about as much. What I knew about the developing world is what I got on National Geographic magazine, and occasionally a movie that might have something about the developing world. I didn't know anything about it, but I can just imagine this woman, if she only had a chair with wheels on it, her life would probably improve. So I go interview all the companies, all the organizations that are trying to do this. They're either using used wheelchairs chairs, you've got to get the cost out of this. Okay, now all of a sudden the engineering is starting to focus, task. And we need an inexpensive, durable, functional chair we can just give away. That's so simple, you just know how to use it. People just use it. So the light resin lawn chair, that's the least expensive chair. Bicycle wheels, the least expensive wheels. Connect the two. Didn't take long to come up with, 9 months, but didn't seem like long. To come up with a design, and I took it over to Mariners Church and had an appointment with the pastor of outreach, Skip Landry, and actually had a Thursday appointment. And I thought they just closed the doors on churches until the next Sunday. And I get to Mariners Church and everybody's busy working. It's kind of an interesting thing. Never been there on a weekday. But he loved the church, the wheelchair. He encouraged me to go to the next step, and I made 100 of them. And then they sat in the garage for about a year and a half. In California, you don't use your garage for cars, so it was okay when I had the door closed. And when I kept the door open, the neighbors, and they couldn't not stare at what I was doing with these chairs. And my wife, Lori, getting a little bit concerned about being able to find things in the garage, so she's encouraging me to get out there. And what I wanted to do was essentially a clinical trial, because as a living, I got new products for other companies through the FDA, and you had to do a clinical trial with human beings. You had to study the safety and efficacy of the product. So 100 is kind of a small number, but I'll get 100 out, and I'll go back a year later and see how they're performing, and then I'll write a paper and go on about the other job of becoming a billionaire. And so they sat, and finally there was an opportunity to go on a mission trip with Mariners. They were looking for doctors and nurses to go to India. And I'm arguing with Lori, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. She just says, go ahead, try it anyway. So the first meeting was kind of hilarious, actually, because they're going around the room. There's 40 people that show up, and there's gynecologists, and there's heart surgeons, and neurosurgeons, and dentists, and nurses, operating room nurses, and trauma surgeons, and there's this engineer who can't practice medicine, doesn't know anything about medicine, and has got 100 wheelchairs to take with him. And they just had no place to understand why I would even be considered to be part of it. And they told me later they thought they was hoping I'd just go away. But I didn't. I persevered. And I wanted to get 100 chairs so I could do the study, and at the last minute, the team dwindled to just 4 of us, and we could only bring 4 wheelchairs with us to India. And I was not greeted with a lot of enthusiasm, because people would ask me logical questions like, how much are they going to cost? And who's going to pay for them? And where are they going to be made? And who's going to do the distribution? And who's going to assemble them, because you're sending them as kits? And then who's going to do all the training? Because, in the United States, you get hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks worth of training when you get a wheelchair. And all I could say is, I don't know. And I didn't have a very persuasive presentation about where this was all going. I just told them, I want to try it. I just want to try it. Leave me alone. I just want to try it. And so I found the same thing in India. And we're human beings. And if we don't have a solution to a problem, we don't think about the problem. And the mission team in India didn't think about disability, because they never had any way of helping a disabled person. So it wasn't even on their radar. And so the next day, after those sort of bleak introductions, on my part at least, we went out to a suburb of Chennai, and I was functioning as a volunteer just to move card tables and boxes and to get everything organized, because I couldn't participate in practicing medicine. So get everything all set up, and people were just sort of relaxing and then waiting for the first patients. And I see somebody walking down this dirt road, and as they get closer, I see there's 2. And they're stopping every now and then. And I see they're carrying something, and they're taking turns carrying it. And I see what they're carrying is another person as they're coming closer. And this person is this boy, and he's flailing his arms and his legs, and he's drooling, and he's grinding his teeth, and his head's just going everywhere, which way. And he's got cerebral palsy, I later found out. And so they get up there, and there's no place for them to sit. And there's some paperwork being done, and so I brought a wheelchair with me, tied it on top of this bus that got us out to the suburbs. The bus says, "Jesus loves you" on the side of it, big red letters. get the chair down and I just put it in front of them and back off, and nobody gave me a translator because I was just kind of a laborer at what I need a translator for. So I just smiled, and I thought the man was going to sit down because that would be the expected thing to do in that culture for him to rest. She was carrying her son, but no, she took her son and put him in the chair. And then she's trying to get his hand so he doesn't get tangled into the armrest, and she gets him all kind of stabilized, and he starts to calm down because it's 100 degrees. He's been carried for 3 months, and so everybody's really hot and tired. And then she gets on the back and she starts rocking him back and forth on the rear wheels, and then she gets a little bit more confident. She's starting to do little figure eights, and just the breeze on his face was pleasing him, and he was even calming down more. So my colleagues, my peers from the U.S. and from India look over and look what's going on. He didn't say a word, and there's that family using that chair. They thought that was amazing. I didn't think it was amazing at all, but they thought it was amazing. So they're thinking, wait a minute, maybe we can find something wrong with this picture because he's challenging us. This is another human trait we have. Try to find something wrong with something we don't necessarily want to accept. So the best thing they can come up with is, what if it doesn't fit through the door? If the wheelchair can't fit through the door, then they'll have to leave it outside, and somebody will take it, and it'll be a terrible failure. So let's see if we can prove that it doesn't fit through the door. Well, engineers, they know about doors. I was pretty confident I was going to pass this test. But we convinced the family to stay, and at the end of the clinic, we got them in the bus and drove them 3 miles back to their little place, their little village where they lived. We drove into the village, and of course none of the villagers could read that Jesus loved them either on the side of the bus, so we were okay. But you can't just drive around with messages like that in the Hindu country. And sure enough, the wheelchair sailed right through the door, and inside the 10-by-10 room with a dirt floor, and there's a little pen for him so he doesn't roll away at night, and they had a blanket for him, so that was his bed. And they had 2 sets of clothes, one to wash, one to wear. They had some pots and pans. That was their total earthly possessions. Now, if they both could work at the rice fields, the rice paddies, they could save money. But because one of them always had to stay home, they took turns staying home with their son. The money they made, they had to pay back for the room and board. So that was their life. But they were so happy. But meanwhile, the neighbors start to show up, and no one could understand. There wasn't a lot of explanation going on, but there's about 40 people. Some of them had handmade crutches out of limbs of trees because they had polio. In other words, there were places for other wheelchairs there. And then Moses was our mission guide, and he starts to look a little bit uncomfortable, and he comes up to me and says, "Don, we've got to leave." I said, "Moses, what's going on? This is great. Can't you see how everything's working?" And Moses says, "Yeah, but I forgot to check in with the elder before I pulled into this village." And I didn't know this, but it's customary in developing countries, if you're going to go to a village, you start with the elder, and you tell them what you're there for, and they give you permission. And if you told them, "I'm a Christian missionary, I want to visit your village," you wouldn't get permission. But so anyway, the elder's pretty upset. So I said, "Moses, before we leave, I'm the engineer. I did my job. I want you to do yours now." And Moses looks at me like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Moses, I noticed you've got a Bible in your pocket. Tell them why we're here." So Moses, clears his throat, his voice, and opens the Bible, and he starts reading. And to me, this was what I would expect. People are quiet when someone reads from a Bible or from any religious text. I mean, it's out of respect. You be quiet, and you either walk away or you pay attention, but you don't mock the person. And nobody was mocking him. The villagers were listening to every word. They're trying to, what's going on here? And then we get into the bus, and we try to leave. And at that point, I think the family realized, hey, the wheelchair's here, and they're leaving. And this wasn't just a photo opportunity, which is about all they would expect, because you don't give away brand new wheelchairs in India without some payment of some sort. So the villagers run after us, and they put their hands on the front of the bus, or the windshield, to stop the bus, and we turn around, and the mom is coming out with 2 glasses of water. And that's, she realized she needed to pay us something back, and that's the only thing she could afford to give away was water. And the water didn't look even clear. I mean, we couldn't drink the water. I mean, it would kill us. But now I'm thinking I'm going to do this clinical trial. I'm going to get all this data about the strength of the tires and the distance they travel and the life change and facts. And then I can make plots. I'm going to make a chart. I'm going to put this in a journal of wheelchair technology. And I'm seeing this has got nothing to do with data, not in a conventional sense. This was passion. This was a change. You can see families change, their lives changed literally in a matter of minutes in front of me. And the whole village was open to an explanation as to why. So 2 days later, the distribution partner, Christian Mission Organization in Chennai, India, they're driving me around India, around Chennai, to show me all the disabled people that need wheelchairs. They wanted to be our distribution partner. I didn't even know I had a problem finding a distribution partner. They solved the problem before I even thought about it, and that's the way it's been ever since. We give our chairs primarily Christian mission organizations. We don't actually give them away ourselves. We say, here, use this chair to advance your ministry, whatever it is. If you're in a vocational training or orphanages or seminary schools, whatever, these chairs are going to help you open doors if you never believe. And so far, we've given out about 700,000 of these chairs in 87 different countries. So I get back to home, and I go to work, having been gone for 3 weeks, and I found out the company went bankrupt while I was gone. So just another little 2x4 over the head from my friend, God. And so we try to get by for a while, and then Lori, who has taken 13 years to raise kids, taking 13 years off, said, well, time for me to go back to work. And within about 2 days, she got her job back at Social Security. And I was thinking I'd become a consultant or something and do whatever, and when I would talk to people, and the people would come up to me and say, well, how can we help you? I said, I don't know what I need. I'm not sure what I want to do. What do you mean by help? I said, well, you should start an organization. You should start a nonprofit. You should get a board. You should get bylaws. You should get a mission statement. You should do this. Yeah, please. I need your help. That's what you think I need. I need to do that. I need your help. And so we started in 2001, and in 2002 we gave away 5,000 wheelchairs, and it's been ramping up ever since. Some really good dear friends that we know from Maine shared a prayer early on when I told them about what we were up to here. It's St. Teresa's prayer. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are his body. Christ has no body on earth now but yours. So I've benefited from generosity of people I've met, primarily in churches. For instance, your congregation has provided over $65,000. We've gotten 2 containers, that's 1,100 wheelchairs out so far. Some of your members of the congregation have been on trips, and they can personally testify what it's like to reach down and put somebody in a wheelchair and see their life change. And I have to conclude one